One of the things that we were talking about yesterday, which is worth putting in here because you are female. Mm-hmm. You're aware of that. It's not a crime. It will be soon. In fact, this will be cancelled because I said you're female. I'm male. Oh, God. And you're young and you nearly got a BPD diagnosis, which means that there is a certain demographic that will listen. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I say it on my own, because I'm white and a middle-aged man, they will not. I don't think you have BPD. And I said this to you yesterday because it vectors in so closely with narcissism that you have to be entitled and exploitative to have BPD. But you're not entitled.
I found that so relieving when you said that.
It's one of the things that I go around saying, like, because I have 70% of my seminars is women. And of that 70%, 30 to 40% have received a BPD diagnosis. And I'm wow. It's insane. It's probably, this isn't just me saying it. There's a big movement against BPD within the psychiatry community. It's the most misdiagnosed personality disorder. Because, as you just said, for people who don't know, BPD is a laundry list of equally weighted traits, which is insane on the face of it, that you and the therapist sort of figure out intersubjectively whether you have or not. And if you get 5 of the 9, then it's BPD, which includes things like a labile sense of self. Well,
most people have that.
Well, if you're an 18-year-old girl, which you were when you did the therapy, you have a labile sense of self. Of course you do. 18-year-old boys, it's the same. It's not as bad in boys, but it's still there. The self-harm, the interpersonal turbulence, all the rest of it. It's so easy to misdiagnose.
The list is like so general. Do you know what I mean? Most people can fit into a lot of those categories.
Absolutely.
So having that diagnosis is just like, nothing special really, because most people do those things or have those things.
The woman, the psychology professor who created the concept of CPTSD, Professor Judith Herman, she's campaigning to have BPD changed to being called emotional dysregulation disorder.
Okay.
Which I think would be closer to the truth.
Right.
Like, because if you, entitled and exploitative is what narcissists and psychopaths are. Unless you're doing a very good act, you don't seem very narcissistic to me.
No, I'd like to think I'm not. I mean, no. I know I'm not because, you know, I always felt like I'm too nice and I was like, let people take advantage of me, don't want to say no, like people pleaser. And, you know, narcissists just aren't like that at all. They're the complete opposite.
No, they're very predatory and they take advantage of people and they exploit them.
Exactly.
And they do it knowingly. And they feel they have the right to. Yeah. Which is the thing with BPD. I was always like, let's make sense of this. To have to have borderline be meaningful in the cluster B, the client has to think that they have a right to hurt others because they're in pain. The narcissist thinks they have the right to hurt others because they're better than everybody else. The psychopath thinks they have the right to hurt others because they don't give a shit and they want what they want. So if that isn't there in you where you're like, no, I have the right. I've suffered terribly. I've had eating disorders and I've self-harm. Therefore, I'm going to be a horrible bastard. That's just not there.
That wouldn't even cross my mind, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I want to help people because I'd never want someone to be in a position that, like I was and not have the help.
Yeah.
So I just, that even saying that, like, oh, I can hurt people because, you know, I had a bad childhood. I'm just like, how does that make sense?
So that logic doesn't work for you.
No.
But it absolutely works for vulnerable narcissists and people with BPD.
It's quite scary hearing that though.
Yeah.
Because they could do anything and justify it just by like, oh, well, I had a bad childhood. So, I killed this person because, you know, I had a bad childhood. And like, oh my God.
They literally do that.
Wow.
They literally do that in interviews with the police after they've done it. They'll be like, yes, I killed them. But the reason is because my mother, I don't know, did this to me.
Oh my God.
And that's where, because the cluster B has more comorbidity than any other cluster. So there's very rarely where you'll find somebody who's just borderline. They'll probably be borderline and psychopathic or histrionic as well. Yeah, they're very rarely just one thing.
Okay.
Yeah, the diagnoses, it's such a strange period in human history as far as psychology goes, where we are just dishing out this diagnosis, mainly to women.
Really? Is it more of a female?
Massively.
Oh, wow.
Male BPDs. I've always said that if I saw a clinician in my late 20s, I would have been diagnosed as a male BPD. But because of the cultural filters that we use, men aren't typically given the diagnosis of BPD. They're typically given the diagnosis of narcissism. But not because of anything that's intrinsic to the client. It's the way it's expressed.
Okay.
So men rage out, women rage in.
Right.
I can go and get into a fight with the police, snort a few lines of coke, drink some Smirnoff Ice, and go and have a fight with the police. You could, but you wouldn't be as successful in that as a strategy as other strategies like self-harm or pulling people into a relationship and then harming them emotionally. I can harm them physically.
Yeah.
So I would get the psychopathy or the narcissism diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
But the core issue is what we're calling borderline personality disorder. Okay. Fractured sense of self, emotional dysregulation. Yeah. All of this, though, is really CPTSD.
Well, I didn't even know what that was until you told me yesterday. Yeah. Because you think of PTSD as like guys who go in the war and they get flashbacks to, you know, I don't know, whatever, like you see in films, don't you?
Yeah.
So that's what I think of. So when you said PTSD, I was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's the CPTSD is the unknown trigger to an unknown response. So you don't even know that you don't even know that you're triggered. You're just feeling random emotions.
Yeah.
Which is what you've been struggling with, right? Is random emotions just popping up that you can't control.
Yeah, like little things in life that would happen. I'd be like, oh my God, I'd go into like a meltdown. I'm like, am I crazy? Like, why am I so emotional?
Yes.
So when you said that, I was actually like, okay, maybe I'm not that crazy.
No. and the disorder side of the personality, when I'm talking to somebody who's personality disordered, and Jacob has filmed me talking to people in the seminars who are personality disordered, it's chaotic.
Oh, no.
The person doesn't really know. We've got footage of it. They don't really know what they're saying.
Really?
Or they'll just repeat themselves, or they'll make a statement and then you'll say, you just said this. And they'll go, no, I didn't. Like, everybody in this room just heard you, and it's on film that you've just, no, well, maybe I said that, but I didn't mean it.
Wow.
You're like, wow, I feel like I'm going crazy. It's, no, I think it's a much more useful way of looking at it, because it means that we start to be able to drill down to like, there's a few things that you need to resolve and then you'll be okay. Whereas if it's BPD, as you just said, like, can you resolve that? Is it a lifelong issue? Is that
just me? Yeah.
Is that just who you are? But you've got the emotional dysregulation, that can be resolved. You've got toxic superego injunction. So the voice inside of your head that's telling you you're not good enough yet, that can actually be resolved.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, got some hope then.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's possible. And that's where the perfectionism is coming from.
Right.
So it's really weird. Like when you're a kid, you absorb information from the environment and it tells you who you are and how you should act in the world. If you're abused, you internalize the idea, I'm a worthless piece of shit. Now I'm going to treat myself like a worthless piece of shit. If you're ignored, it's the same message. It's just a silent message. I'm worthless. I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
So then that's how you asked me about Freud. Yes, it's a Freudian concept, the super ego.
That's it. Yeah. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really, really cool. But then you have a schedule of going, okay, it might be years, but at least there is a way out. At least there is a way of
there's some like light at the end of the tunnel almost.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it takes years of work. And it's like with the gym, like a lot of people don't want to do the healing work because it's so hard and painful. Like it's scary. Like when I'm in therapy, like so much stuff comes to the surface and it's hard to talk about. And I feel like the more therapy you do, the more of that stuff comes to the surface. And it's not easy to talk about at all. And you've actually got to want to help yourself. And some people just think, oh, it's fine. I can just, go about my life and get on with it. And then that's when it all comes out and it gets even worse then.
It shouldn't be painful. If you do like 10 sessions, maybe like half an hour of one session would probably be painful, but really it shouldn't.
Really?
Yeah, it shouldn't hurt. No.
Wow.
No, the way I do it and the way that I have my coaches do it, Steve and Terry, we say to people like it shouldn't, but it's a very common held belief. Like we're trained to think, oh, if I'm doing therapy, I'll be crying and snot will come out, and then you lie on the floor but no, usually it's quite conversational, because in order to understand the emotion and in order to understand the experience, you don't have to re-experience it again.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't. I think it's like a religious thing that we've got from maybe like the Christian, like exorcism, like a demon, and you're like, flipping out, vomiting, and no, it becomes. You probably will cry at some point, but you wouldn't be upset. You'd just be sad. Okay. So you start to grieve. But yeah, generally speaking, it shouldn't hurt. I've spoken to people recently and offered them to do therapy, and they've run a mile because they think it's going to hurt.
Right.
Or they think it's going to be something where there'll be like humiliated or put through an undignified experience. But generally speaking, it's pretty gentle. It's conversational.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, with my therapist, like she's very like, you need to feel emotions, because I can be very like emotionless. Like when I talk about my past and, you know, what happened and stuff, I'm very just dissociative of it. I'm like, that wasn't me, that was someone else almost. And she's like, no, you need to sit with those feelings. You need to be sad. And I'm like, well, okay. What do you want me to do? Cry? Like,
she should just punch you in the face if she wants you to be miserable. You need to identify the emotions, but you don't need to re-experience them. Like if you say, okay, at 4 years old, I went through this. I don't know, maybe it was fine. And then we have a conversation about it. It's like, well, what's likely that you would have been feeling? You as an adult can point backwards in time and say, that child would have felt really, really sad and alone. And now I feel sad about that. But you don't have to re-experience being a 4-year-old and being about like, what the fuck? No,
I know there's no point.
There's no point.